Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we are looking at a changelog in War Thunder which has a ton of very significant changes. This one came out on the 21st of April 2020 and it's for updates 1.97.1.65. So let's get into it, let's see what these significant changes are and see how they will obviously enhance gameplay. So the first one is huge when it comes to ground vehicles, and the reason why it's huge is, well, because it is going to, well, it should fundamentally change how you play in a defensive nature. It should give you more tools, and it is the rangefinder now works with binoculars. So if you didn't know before, in order to get the rangefinder to work, you would have to use it through the gunner sight and only the gunner sight. This would mean that in order to be able to find a target, you would have to be able to look at it, therefore expose yourself to see the target. With the binoculars only having access, with the binoculars also having access to the rangefinder, this means that now you can take a very defensive position, whether it's behind cover or whether it's in a specific area. You can use your binos to now not just scout, but also rangefind an enemy, and therefore be able to know its distance before you have to peek or before you have to expose yourself in order to hit the target. This gives another tool for the defensive side or defensive-minded player in War Thunder. And generally, when it comes to War Thunder, when it comes to, obviously PvP battles, if you have a structure to them or if you have a decent squad around you, in my opinion, War Thunder is an inherently defensive game. It's a game which massively enhances the ability to win through the defensive playstyle, and the reason for this is because it's very easy to hold corners, it's very easy to just wait and listen to sounds such as engines to see where the enemy is coming from, and generally a lot of paths are pretty much sorted on most maps when it comes to War Thunder, so therefore you can have a decent guess where the majority of action is going to happen, so you can then set up, where you're going to fight the enemies. And one of the big things, or one of the big issues with this playstyle was the fact that if you are sitting in one of these areas, the way that I play is I use the first 2 or 3 minutes into a battle to find a position either around a cap zone, after capping a capture zone, or around a cap zone, which I think is going to be contested in the first 5 minutes, and then setting up stock, waiting for people to push, annihilating them, and then pushing, taking the position, moving back, and then waiting for the counterattack, then going forward again, right? That is pretty much my playstyle down to the T. It seems to work pretty well on the majority of maps. Obviously has to be altered if we look at it in different situations. Now, with that playstyle in mind, or with any defensive playstyle in mind, one of the issues, especially on larger maps that you have, is it's pretty impossible to be able to tell how far the enemy is away from you, especially if you have a gun which doesn't have the greatest muzzle velocity, something like, machines which have heat FS, the IKV-91, which is one of the vehicles I've very much enjoyed recently, not the greatest muzzle velocity, stuff like even the Leopard, but, the majority of vehicles, especially as you go higher in the tiers, this isn't really an issue, but at lower tiers, maybe from rank 1 to rank 5, this is a big issue. So in order to be able to rangefind through the binoculars, which of course is basically the commander's sight, fixes a lot of these issues, that we've talked about in the past. So now you get another tool to be able to use. Also, through the binoculars, it seems like if you have the rangefinder upgrade, so if you have either the rangefinder modification or the laser rangefinder modification, both of them work through the binoculars as well. I think this shouldn't be the case. I think you should just normally have a normal rangefinder through the commander's sight and not a modified one if you have the modifications, because I think it's extremely crazy good once you do. Being able to just spot someone and being able to range find them, being able to, pretty much just work out exactly where to shoot them as quickly as possible, especially if they're in a defensive position. It's just insane to think about that you will be able to pretty much corner peek or pretty much just hit targets now that like 1 or 2 seconds quicker because you've already range found the target. So yeah, this means that battles or little skirmishes should act even shorter if played correctly, and it also gives scouts a little bit more information, which is really nice. I still think there should be like a command where if you scouted an enemy, let's say you scouted him and you've also range found him, what is wrong with there being a thing in the chat which says says, look at this scouted target, he's 800 meters from my position, or something like that. Like, it could just say, target scouted, medium tank, 800 meters. And then that would just give more information to your team. It would be able to tell, your team what you are looking at, and hopefully more people would actually see what's going on. But even in squad play, obviously this is going to be great, because you can scout a vehicle, and then you can tell them how far away it is from you, and then they can work the calculation from there. So it's just wonderful. More information is power in War Thunder, and this is another thing which increases that. The next point is the lack of the tracks and brake system modification will now have less effect on a vehicle's mobility. This is wonderful. One of the issues in War Thunder, one of the criminal problems in War Thunder, is that the fact that a spaded vehicle is so different to a fully stock vehicle. It's just a terrible travesty that they are the same BR. It makes completely no sense to me on a fundamental level, and I think trying to lessen the you either have to do it in two ways. You either have to make the stock vehicle stronger, or you have to reduce the RP requirements for the modifications, or you make the modifications have less of an effect on that stock machine. And this is going for that third option. So the fact that tracks and brake system will now have less effect on the vehicle's mobility, this means that in a stock state you will have more mobility than you did before. So you won't be as hindered by not having those modifications, therefore those modifications become a little bit less useful, but at the end of the day, you're still getting the same benefits, you're just not, you're just not having to do it through getting a modification. I think this is good. Obviously, this helps a lot when it comes to mobility of vehicles, but also the general grinding experience of a lot of vehicles. I'm a person who has never used GE on, purchasing vehicles on modifications, so having this sat here and being able to, make the grind a little bit easier for me and everybody else, I think is only a positive for people. And then the next one is ground vehicle maneuverability in turns and pivots in RB and SB has been increased. Loss of power in turns has been decreased. These effects are different for every tank, but in general, turns and pivots will now take significantly less time. So now, on top of those changes on the tracks and the brake system, overall mobility has improved for pretty much every vehicle, or at least it should have improved for every vehicle. Once again, this is great. One of the big things about War Thunder, which is incredibly important, is getting where you need to be and getting there quicker, or being able to adapt to situations quickly, especially on a lot of these small maps. And this change makes it so you can at a better rate than you could before. It is so annoying using like a Soviet vehicle, or using a vehicle without modifications like the horizontal turret drive or the engine or something like that. Like examples I can give recently are stuff like the Type 59 or the Type 69, which sit in the 8.0 bracket for China, and one of their issues is that they get up-tiered a lot, especially into 9.0, and it's incredibly annoying when you get set up in a position and you're already at a disadvantage because you're facing these vehicles which are way higher BR than you, and what happens is your turret rotation is so slow and your chassis rotation is so slow, people can just go around you and you can't react. So with changes like this, and then with changes to the tracks and the brake system, these only improve those vehicles' ability to react. So instead of, your physical model being too slow, now it is more of a mental, problem. If you are too slow to react to issues, then, then it may be more on your reaction side of things instead of the vehicle's reaction times, because it's one of the most annoying things in War Thunder is realizing a situation is going down and then reacting to it, but realizing your vehicle is not able to react to it quick enough, even though you spotted it as early as you can. So these changes do definitely help that. The operation of the ballistic computer for helicopters has been fixed. I remember a lot of people telling me over the last few weeks that the ballistic computer was broken, so it's nice to see that. So that is back online for those helicopters. Hopefully it stays online, and I'm still unsure about the whole ballistic computer things. I think it's generally a good idea because, well, as we go forward in technology, it was obviously going to come. I am kind of always worried about about guided munitions when it comes to from the air to the ground, just because of the fact that I think it takes quite a lot of the skill out of the game. But then again, you know, top tier is, you know, Clown Fiesta, so why not just keep it like that? The IKV-91, the horizontal and vertical shell dispersion have been reduced, so the accuracy basically of the IKV-91 has increased. I never thought that was an issue. As I've said before, I think the IKV-91 is a solid light vehicle. What they need to do is they need to add hull brake to it. It doesn't seem to have hull brake, or at least it doesn't have hull brake through the turrets, and I think it should. So that would be the change I make on the vehicle. And I know a lot of people don't like hull brake, I know a lot of people don't advocate for it, but if we just compare it to other machines at a similar level, it should have hull brake. The Tunguska, so the ZPRK2S6, the Challenger 2, FV510 Warrior, and Stormer HVM, the setup of the thermal vision sights has been changed to a more modern version. So the Warrior at 8.0 is going to have very modern thermals. Well, that's nice. I mean, the thermals were already ridiculous on the Warrior. They are ridiculous on all of those 8.0 vehicles, such as the Centauro, the Bradley, the Type 89, I believe it is, and also the Baglet, which are, you know, both slightly higher BR. So to have even more modern thermals on these vehicles, especially stuff like the Challenger 2, the Warrior, and the Tunguska, will only enhance their performance. We'll see how much that affects everything. I think the main one there it definitely affects is the Warrior and also the Challenger 2. So the Challenger 2 is now at the same level as a lot of vehicles that it faces. The SD KFC 2341, 2, 3, and 4, a bug with AP shells where the fuses would not be cocked on particular hull parts of the required thickness has been fixed. Well, that's good. Now the shells for those should be a little bit more defined, so therefore you can work around that. The T55A and also the Type 74, the position of the IR projector has now correctly coincides with the respective tank model. Well, that's nice. It's kind of odd that it wasn't in the first place, but at least it's fixed now. The T62, T62M1, and then the Chinese Premium T62, the vertical aiming speed has been specified. It's been increased from 4.5 to 6 degrees per second, so still not great, but better, which is good. If you've never used the Soviet high-tier vehicles, especially stuff without upgrades, so T62s, T62M1, T72s, T64s, T80s, stuff like that, the vertical aiming speed is so slow, and the majority of the time you're just kind of waiting there for the gun to actually lay properly so you can shoot targets, which makes them really annoying to use. So to see an increase in that is really nice, if I'm going to be honest with you. The T62M1 as well gets an improved sight magnification from 7 to 8 times, and that's because of the 80 gem launch requires 8 times magnification, so that's nice, you know, a little buff to the T62M1. I think the buff it needs is to be reduced in BR, but you know, that's a story for a different time. I'm going to start playing the T62M1 a bit more, just to see how it stacks up against a lot of the machines that are around the place. But I remember the last time I played it, it was just me getting annihilated by helicopters, so hopefully that isn't the case nowadays. The T55AM, a bug with the use of the minimum magnification for conventional sights and the maximum for the 1K13 sight has been fixed. Well, that's good. The BMP2 as well, sight magnification has been improved from 5.6 to 6. Gun depression angle has also been specified from -10 to -4. Well, that doesn't really matter, you know, losing 1 degree of gun depression. Most of the time, that should only affect the missile, since, you know, the missile now follows the crosshair, or it's supposed to follow the crosshair, so you won't be able to go down below -4 degrees, so you're going to have to be on pretty much the same level as machines. I mean, it's only, as I said, -5 to -4, so it's not too much of a difference, but as you expand out the range there, it's going to make more of a difference. But yeah, I think these changes are incredibly minor, so I don't think it'll change the vehicle. The MX-10RC, the buoyancy has been improved. The rear doesn't drown when the tank halts while afloat. Now, there were some really funny videos and pictures of the MX-10RC when this first happened. It was as if it was like Jesus floating on the water, but I'll show you in a second that they've fixed that now, which is good. The T44, the tank weight has been specified from the 31.8 to 31 tons, so it's a little bit lighter, so it should be a little bit more more maneuverable in most of the areas. I kind of feel bad for the T-44. When the T-44 back in the day, it was a beast. It was a really fun little vehicle, and it still is a pretty fun little vehicle. I just feel like now that there's a lot more heavy tanks around the area with a ton more armor, it struggles, you know, against stuff like the T-34s, you know, the Tiger 2H, it's always struggled against because it has to use APCR to pen its turret, and that's a bit of a pain. But every you know, every other setup for it against like the mediums and lights it does really well with. It just struggles against the heavies, and yeah, I have advocated in the past for a BR decrease for the T-54, and I still advocate for it. I think it should go down by 0.3, but yeah, it's just one of those vehicles which is used to be really good and not so good anymore. The T-72A, the engine RPM has been decreased to 2000 from 2100, so that loses a little bit of power, which is kind of sad. And the T-10M, they've increased the amount of ammunition for the 14.5 and to 750 from 450. So this may not seem like a big change, but if I'm honest with you, it's more of a significant change than you may think. The reason for this is because with the amount of light vehicles running around right now, having a machine gun with more ammunition pretty much means that you are able to do so much more damage to them if you have more ammunition. You know, around the BR of the T-10M, you know, 8.3, you have a lot of stuff like the Orbals, the Centauros, you have a lot of other IFVs running around, and that's KPV, or whatever it is, on the top of the T-10M, does a ton of damage to them. It also does a ton of damage to aircraft, so it's really one of the best secondary weapons that you can have in the game for dealing with these lightly skinned targets, and it's nice to see that now it's even more effective at doing it, especially for a heavy vehicle. So those are the changelog changes. I'm going to show you the AMX 10RC in action when it comes to its amphibious ability, and as you can see, it isn't Jesus anymore, but I tell you what, it does actually float properly. So well done to the AMX 10RC. Hopefully we get a version of the AMX 10RC which has a stabilizer on it, because that's pretty much the drawback that this thing has. But it is nice to see that, you know, this thing doesn't just pretty much drown itself in any water. It's definitely low to the ground, but it's fine, you know. it can bob about and it can do pretty well. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I just want to thank Ambrosius McClellan, B. Young, Blackie, Chris Giltnane, Daniel Stanton, Jay Wilt, John Ryman, Martinez, Super Cacti, Trigger Hippie, Eugens Terry, and also Elove Goat and Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.